had always been the picture of financial responsibility. I balanced our checkbook to the penny, never missed a bill payment, and built our son's college fund one careful deposit at a time. So when I stared at our empty accounts that morning and found Nicholas's hastily scrawled note explaining he'd left with Trisha from his office, taking every cent we'd saved for Alvin's future, it felt like I'd woken up in someone else's nightmare. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Our life had been methodically constructed, brick by steady brick. Nicholas and I met during our senior year of college, both business majors with 5-year plans and dreams bigger than our student loan debts. We married 2 years after graduation, once we'd both secured entry-level positions at respectable firms. I still remember the spreadsheet we created that night, planning out when we'd buy a house, when we'd start a family, how much we needed to save each month. By the time Alvin was born 3 years later, we had everything mapped out. Our modest 3-bedroom in the suburbs wasn't extravagant, but the school district was excellent. Nicholas had worked his way up to regional manager at Landon Financial, while I balanced part-time accounting work with raising our son. Every month without fail, we put money into Alvin's college fund, investing in his future, Nicholas would say proudly. Our weekends followed a comfortable routine. Saturday mornings at Alvin's soccer games, where Nicholas coached with unexpected patience, afternoons running errands or visiting my sister Maxine and her family. Sunday brunches at home with the crossword puzzle spread between us. It wasn't exciting, perhaps, but it was solid, dependable. I managed our finances with military precision. Every expense tracked, every splurge carefully considered. "You're too cautious," Nicholas would sometimes tease. But he never complained when our careful planning allowed us to take that trip to Yellowstone or replace the aging roof without touching our emergency fund. "Mom, do you think I'll be able to go to your old university?" Alvin asked one evening as I tucked him in, his walls covered with pennants from my alma mater. He was only 10, but already thinking about his future with a seriousness that sometimes made my heart ache. "If that's where you want to go, sweetheart," I answered. "Your college fund is growing nicely. Your father and I are making sure you'll have options." That night, Nicholas kissed my temple as we went through our monthly budget review at the kitchen table. "We're doing okay, aren't we, Maxine?" he said, and I leaned into him, content. More than okay, I thought. We were secure. Nicholas had been working longer hours over the past 6 months, taking on new clients as the firm expanded. "This promotion could change everything," he'd explain when he missed dinner or Alvin's soccer games. I noticed the subtle changes: new clothes, a more expensive haircut, the gym membership he suddenly couldn't live without, but rationalized them as part of his professional development. After all, appearances mattered in finance. There was a new administrative assistant in his department, Trisha Morgan. Nicholas mentioned her occasionally, her efficiency, her innovative ideas for client management. I met her at the company Christmas party, a willowy blonde with a laugh that seemed to fill the room. She was younger than us by several years, recently divorced, ambitious. I felt a momentary twinge when I saw how she looked at my husband, but dismissed it as insecurity. Nicholas and I had built too much together to be threatened by a pretty face. If I'm being honest with myself now, there were signs. The late-night texts he'd step away to answer. The business trips that seemed to multiply. The vague explanations about client dinners. The way he'd grown distant, physically and emotionally, always exhausted or preoccupied. But when you've spent 12 years believing in someone, doubt feels like betrayal. That final week before everything collapsed, Nicholas was unusually attentive. He brought home flowers on Tuesday, suggested we take Alvin to his favorite restaurant on Wednesday, asked about revisiting Hawaii for our anniversary on Thursday. I remember feeling a wave of relief. Whatever had been causing the distance between us seemed to be resolving itself. Friday morning, Nicholas kissed me goodbye with lingering tenderness. "I love you," he said, holding my gaze a beat longer than usual. "You know that, right?" "Of course," I answered, straightening his tie the way I had countless mornings before. "We're partners." He nodded, something unreadable crossing his face. Then he hugged Alvin with fierce intensity, telling him to be good for your mom before heading out the door. I spent that day catching up on freelance work and planning our weekend. Alvin had a championship soccer game on Saturday, and I wanted to host a small celebration afterward, win or lose. I called Maxine to invite her family, pre-ordered Alvin's favorite cake from the bakery downtown. When Nicholas didn't return by dinner, I assumed he was working late. When my calls went straight to voicemail, I told myself his phone had died. When he hadn't come home by the time I put Alvin to bed, I began to worry about an accident. I was sitting at the kitchen table at midnight, about to call hospitals, when I decided to check our accounts, a nervous habit from years of financial vigilance. Our checking account balance read $42.13. The savings account, 0.00. Alvin's college fund, which had contained $43,582.19 the previous day, 0.1 My hands trembling, I logged into our investment accounts. Empty. Our emergency fund, gone. The small inheritance from my father that I'd been saving, vanished. It was only then that I noticed the envelope on the counter, half hidden behind the fruit bowl. My name written in Nicholas's distinctive scrawl. "Maxine," it began. "By the time you read this, Trisha and I will be somewhere you can't find us. I've been miserable for years, suffocating in this life we built. I need freedom, a fresh start. I've taken what I need to begin again. I'm sorry to do this to you and Alvin, but you'll be fine. You've always been the strong one. Don't try to contact me. It's better this way. No, I love you." No real apology. Not even a goodbye to his son. I sat at that kitchen table until dawn broke, the letter crumpled in my fist, trying to comprehend how the man who had helped me plan every careful step of our lives together could destroy it all in a single day. Everything we'd built, our stability, our son's future, my trust, gone. And I hadn't seen it coming. When Alvin padded into the kitchen in his superhero pajamas, rubbing sleep from his eyes and asking where Daddy was, I realized the nightmare was only beginning. "Daddy had to go away for work," I lied, my voice steadier than I felt. "Let's have some breakfast, okay?" Alvin nodded, climbing onto his usual chair as I went through the motions of pouring cereal, my mind racing with calculations I couldn't make add up. While Alvin ate, I slipped away to call Nicholas's office. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Walsh, but Nicholas hasn't come in today," his assistant said. Not Trisha. She wasn't answering either. "Perhaps try his cell?" Next came the bank. "Yes, Mrs. Walsh. The withdrawals were made yesterday afternoon. Your husband?" Showed proper identification and had all the necessary account information. I'm afraid since he's a joint account holder, there was nothing irregular about the transactions. Joint accounts. My stomach churned. When we married, it had seemed like the natural choice. What was mine was his. What was his was mine. We were a team. But Alvin's college fund? That had been separate, requiring both our signatures for withdrawals. Unless the paperwork was updated last month, the bank manager explained when I pressed. Mr. Walsh brought in a signed authorization form permitting single-party withdrawals. My signature. He had forged my signature, planning this for weeks, maybe months. I hung up and leaned against the wall, trying to breathe through the panic. 12 years of careful saving, gone. The security we'd built for our son, gone. Our future, gone. When the doorbell rang, I composed myself and found Evan, Nicholas's best friend since college, standing on my porch looking uncomfortable. "I didn't know," he said immediately, stepping inside. "I swear to God, Maxine, I had no idea he was planning this. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But you knew about Trisha, I said, the truth dawning from his guilty expression. Evan rubbed his face. I told him to end it or tell you. I never thought he'd... He gestured helplessly. He called me this morning from the airport, told me to check on you and Alvin. Airport? My voice rose. Where are they going? He wouldn't say, just that they needed a fresh start. Evan pulled an envelope from his jacket. He asked me to give you this. Inside was a cashier's check for $5,000, a fraction of what he'd taken, an insulting afterthought. How generous, I said bitterly. He steals our life savings and leaves us pocket change. I called in a favor with my cousin at the credit card. Company, Evan said quietly. They booked flights to Aruba. Aruba, our honeymoon destination. The irony wasn't lost on me. After Evan left, promising to help however he could, I sat on the couch staring at nothing. The house was silent except for Alvin playing video games upstairs, blissfully unaware that his world had just imploded. I tried Nicholas's cell again, straight to voicemail. I left a message, my voice shaking with anger. How could you do this? To Alvin? He trusted you. I trusted you. Come home and fix this. Please. I called Maxine next. She arrived 30 minutes later, her face a storm of fury when I explained what happened. That absolute bastard, she hissed, mindful of Alvin upstairs. I never thought Nicholas would... She stopped. What did he do with all the money? An excellent question. Bank transfers would leave a trail. He must have withdrawn cash, probably in increments to avoid suspicion. I have to tell Alvin something, I said. He keeps asking when Nicholas will be home. Maxine's expression softened. You don't have to tell him everything today. But I knew my son. He was perceptive, thoughtful. He would sense something was deeply wrong, and half-truths would only confuse him more. When I called Alvin downstairs, he looked between Maxine and me, instantly alert to the tension. What's wrong? Is Daddy okay? I sat him down, choosing my words carefully. Daddy decided to go away for a while. He's with someone else now, a friend from work. Alvin's forehead wrinkled. Like a vacation? No, sweetheart, he's not coming. Back to live with us. The silence that followed felt endless. Alvin's expression shifted from confusion to dawning comprehension. Did he leave because of me? His voice was small. No. I pulled him close. This has nothing to do with you. Your father made some very selfish choices, but they're not because of anything you did. Alvin pulled away, eyes bright with tears. But where did he go? Why didn't he say goodbye? I couldn't bring myself to tell him about the money yet. That conversation could wait. I don't know where exactly, honey. He left very suddenly. Can I call him? I handed him my phone, Nicholas's number already dialed. It went straight to voicemail again. Alvin's face crumpled as he listened to his father's familiar greeting, then handed the phone back without leaving a message. Later that night, after Maxine had gone home promising to return tomorrow, I sat on the edge of Alvin's bed. He had barely spoken since our conversation, retreating into himself in a way that terrified me. We're going to be okay, I said, smoothing his hair back. Are we going to be poor now? He asked suddenly. My breath caught. Of course he would worry about that. Even at 10, he understood money meant security. Things will be tight for a while, I admitted, but I'll make sure we have what we need. What about college? Dad always said I needed to go to college to get a good job. The question pierced me. How could I tell him his father had stolen that future from him? We'll figure it out, I promised. There are scholarships, loans if we need them, and I'll start saving again. He nodded solemnly, too serious for a child his age. I can help. I can do chores for neighbors like mowing lawns. My heart broke at his eagerness to shoulder adult problems. That's very thoughtful, but your job is to be a kid and do well in school. After he fell asleep, I retreated to the kitchen table, command central for our family's organization. I pulled out our files, our budget plans, and began a grim inventory of what remained. The mortgage payment was due in 2 weeks. The property taxes next month. Alvin needed new shoes for school. My part-time accounting work wouldn't cover half our expenses. I stared at Nicholas's smiling face in our family portrait, trying to reconcile the man I thought I knew with someone capable of such calculated betrayal. Had he ever loved us? Or had we just been convenient until something more exciting came along? My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. I'm sorry. Please don't look for us. It's better this way. Take care of Alvin. I nearly threw the phone across the room. Better? Better for whom? Not for the 10-year-old sleeping upstairs whose father had abandoned him. Not for me, left to pick up the pieces of our shattered life. In that moment, something hardened inside me. Nicholas had taken our money, our security, our trust, but he would not take our dignity or our future. I would rebuild everything, somehow. I texted back one word: coward. Then I blocked the number and went back to my calculations. There would be time for grief later. Now was the time for survival. Sleep evaded me that night. I sat at the kitchen table until 3 a.m., surrounded by bills, bank statements, and the remnants of our financial life. The numbers refused to cooperate, no matter how I adjusted them. Without Nicholas's income and with our savings gone, we were sinking fast. By morning, my eyes were swollen from crying, but I'd formulated the beginnings of a plan. I called my supervisor at the accounting firm where I worked part-time. Rodney, I need to talk to you about increasing my hours, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Full-time, if possible. Maxine, everything okay? His concern was genuine. I'd worked for him for 6 years, always declining full-time offers to prioritize being home for Alvin. Nicholas left, I said simply. He's not coming back. A pause. I'm so sorry. Another pause. Come in Monday. We'll figure something out. Next, I called our mortgage company, explaining the situation and asking about hardship programs. They offered a temporary reduction in payments, not ideal, but it would buy me time. I was working through my checklist when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Selena, Nicholas's mother, her face etched with worry. Evan called me, she said, stepping inside. Please tell me it isn't true. I led her to the kitchen, where my financial disaster was spread across the table. He took everything, Selena, every penny we had saved. She sank into a chair, shaking her head in disbelief. I don't understand. Nicholas has always been responsible. Always. Apparently not, I cut in, harsher than I intended. Selena reached for my hand. What can I do? I almost broke down at her kindness. Nicholas had been her only child. I knew how much she adored him. Yet here she was, standing by us instead of making excuses for him. Just be there for Alvin, I said. He's going to need his grandmother. And you? She asked. What do you need? What did I need? Time to rewind to before my life imploded? A miracle to refill our accounts? The satisfaction of watching Nicholas face consequences for what he'd done? I need to keep this house, I said finally. For Alvin's sake. He's already lost his father. I can't uproot him from his home and school, too. Selena opened her purse and removed her checkbook. Let me help. Nicholas's father left me well provided for. Pride made me want to refuse, but practicality won out. I needed to put Alvin first. Thank you, I said, accepting the check she wrote. enough to cover 3 months of expenses. I'll pay you back. Don't you dare, she said firmly. This is for my grandson, and for you. After Selena left, I called Detective Nicole Rivera, an old college friend who now worked in financial crimes. He committed fraud, Maxine, she said after I explained. Forging your signature, emptying accounts he needed dual authorization for. That's criminal. Can you help me find him? I can file reports, put alerts on his passport and credit cards. But Aruba complicates things. International jurisdiction is tricky. I just want what's ours back, I said. Alvin's college fund at minimum. I'll do what I can, Nicole promised. But prepare yourself. Recovery in these cases isn't always possible. The weekend passed in a blur of phone calls and paperwork. I canceled joint credit cards, changed passwords on all our accounts, began the process of legally separating our finances. Each step felt like severing limbs from my body. Painful but necessary for survival. Alvin was eerily quiet, watching me with solemn eyes as I moved through the house like a hurricane. Alternately, tearful and determined, he followed me from room to room, as if afraid I might disappear too if he let me out of his sight. Sunday night, I found him sitting on Nicholas's side of the bed, holding his father's abandoned watch. Do you think he misses us? He asked. The question knocked the wind from me. I wanted to lie, to protect him, but I couldn't bring myself to create false hope. I don't know, sweetheart, I said, sitting beside him, but that doesn't change how important you are. I heard you on the phone, he said suddenly, about money, about college. My heart sank. Of course he had overheard. Our house wasn't that big. Dad took our money, didn't he? That's why you're worried. I took a deep breath. Yes? He made some bad choices. All of it? Most of it, I admitted. But we're going to be okay, I promise. His small face crumpled, not with sadness, but with something that looked disturbingly like shame. It's because I'm not good enough. I got a B in math last semester. He was disappointed. I gathered him into my arms, horrified. No, Alvin, this has nothing to do with you. Your father. I searched for words a child could understand. He wanted something different, and he made selfish choices. That's on him, not you. He nodded against my shoulder, but I could tell he didn't fully believe. Me? How could he? In his 10-year-old mind, there must be a reason his father had left without saying goodbye, had taken the money meant for his future. Children blame themselves. It's easier than accepting that parents can be deeply flawed. Monday morning, I drove Alvin to school, both of us exhausted from restless nights. As he climbed out of the car, he paused. Mom, are you going to leave too? The question shattered me. Never, I said fiercely. You and me were a team, always. He attempted a smile, then trudged toward the building where his friends waited, his shoulders hunched under the invisible weight of his new reality. At work, Rodney offered me not just full-time hours, but a promotion to senior accountant. You've earned it, he said. And frankly, we need someone with your attention to detail. The salary would help, though it still wouldn't replace everything we'd lost. But it was a start, a foundation to rebuild upon. That evening, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, really looking at myself for the first time since Nicholas left. I was pale, with dark circles under my eyes and tension etched into every line of my face. I barely recognized the fearful woman staring back at me. You can do this, I told my reflection, not entirely convinced. My phone rang. Nicole. We tracked the cash withdrawals, she said without preamble. Your husband converted most of it to bearer bonds and cashier's checks before leaving the country. He knew what he was doing, Maxine. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. The confirmation of his premeditation felt like another betrayal. Nicholas had sat across from me at dinner, slept beside me, kissed me goodbye each morning, all while plotting to destroy our future. Can you recover any of it? I asked, already knowing the answer. We'll try. But he's covered his tracks well. I thanked her and hung up, then sank to the bathroom floor and finally allowed myself to really cry, for the marriage that had been a lie, for the future that had been stolen, and for Alvin, who would grow up questioning his worth because his father had chosen money and a younger woman over him. When I emerged from the bathroom, I found Alvin waiting in the hallway, his face determined despite the fear in his eyes. "We don't need him," he said with a conviction that belied his age. "We'll be okay without Dad," out of the mouths of babes. In that moment, I knew we would be. Word travels fast in a small community. By the end of the week, the sympathetic glances and hushed conversations that stopped when I approached told me everyone knew. Nicholas's abandonment had become public knowledge, each retelling likely embellished with speculation and judgment. The PTA meeting that Thursday was excruciating. I sat alone in the back row, acutely aware of the empty seat beside me where Nicholas usually sat. Mothers who had never given me a second glance now studied me with curious eyes, their expressions a mixture of pity and morbid fascination. Maxine, Diane Peterson, the PTA president, intercepted me as I tried to slip out early. "We haven't seen Nicholas. Is everything all right?" Her tone suggested she already knew the answer. I straightened my shoulders, forcing a neutral expression. "Nicholas and I have separated," I said evenly. "I'd appreciate some privacy while we adjust." She nodded too quickly. "Of course. Just know we're all here for you. Being a single mom isn't easy." Single mom. The label hit me like a physical blow. Technically accurate, but painfully new. As I walked to my car, I overheard snippets of conversation. With his secretary, apparently. Took all their money. Poor little Alvin. I drove home with white knuckles, fighting back tears of humiliation. It wasn't enough that Nicholas had betrayed us. Now we had to live under the microscope of community gossip as well. Alvin's soccer coach called the next day. "Maxine, I wanted to check on Alvin. He seems distracted." "Rodney told me about Nicholas. I'm sorry." I closed my eyes, imagining the conversations happening throughout town. "Alvin's adjusting," I said carefully. "It would help if things could stay normal for him. Soccer is important." "Of course," Coach Bennett assured me. "But, Nicholas was our team treasurer. We need someone to manage the account. Would you—" I almost laughed. Of course, Nicholas had been in charge of money for the soccer team. The irony was bitter. "I'll help until you find someone permanent," I agreed, adding another responsibility to my overflowing plate. At Alvin's school, I requested a meeting with his teacher and the guidance counselor. Ms. Winters, a compassionate woman in her 50s, listened attentively as I explained our situation. "Children often blame themselves when parents leave," she said gently. "Even when we tell them it's not their fault. He thinks it's because he got a B in math," I admitted, my voice breaking. "How do I make him understand this isn't about him?" "Consistency and reassurance," the counselor suggested. "And perhaps some sessions with me? We offer support groups for children experiencing family changes." Family changes. Such a sanitized term for what felt like emotional amputation. I nodded gratefully. Anything that will help him. That night, Alvin had his first nightmare. I woke to his screams and found him tangled in sheets, his face wet with tears. "He took you too," he sobbed as I gathered him into my arms. "Dad came back and took you away." I rocked him until his breathing steadied, making promises I prayed I could keep. "I'm not going anywhere, we're going to be okay." But would we? The financial reality was even grimmer than I'd initially calculated. Nicholas's absence had exposed just how much I'd depended on his income. My new full-time salary covered the essentials: mortgage, utilities, groceries, but left nothing for emergencies, let alone rebuilding Alvin's college fund. I began selling things. My jewelry first, then our second car, then the expensive exercise equipment Nicholas had insisted we needed. Each sale felt like peeling away layers of our former life, a tangible unraveling of the security I'd thought we had. Maxine arrived one afternoon with groceries and a job offer. The foundation needs an accountant for a special project. 3 months. Excellent pay. You can work from home most days. I hesitated. I just started full-time at the firm. I can't risk that stability. It's nights and weekends, she explained. Grueling, but temporary, and it pays enough to make a difference. The thought of working 7 days a week was exhausting. But what choice did I have? Thank you, I said, accepting both the groceries and the opportunity. I don't know what I'd do without you. That's what family is for, she replied, her unspoken comparison to Nicholas hanging between us. The hardest conversation came when Nicholas's father, George, called from his retirement community in Florida. At 82, his health was fragile, and I'd been dreading this moment. Tell me it's not true, he demanded, his voice reedy with age and emotion. Selena says Nicholas abandoned you and Alvin. I closed my eyes, wishing I could spare him this pain. I'm sorry, George. It's true. His breathing was labored on the other end of the line. My son would never. There must be some mistake. I wish there was, I said softly. Let me talk to him. I'll set him straight. We don't know where he is exactly, I admitted. He's left the country. A long silence followed, then a heavy sigh. His mother and I raised him better than this. Yes, you did. I couldn't bring myself to tell him about the money, about how methodically Nicholas had planned his escape. Some truths were too cruel to share. Alvin, George said finally, how is my grandson? Struggling. He misses his father. I'm sending money, he declared, for Alvin's college. Not much, but what I can spare. I tried to refuse, but George was adamant. Nicholas was raised to honor his responsibilities. If he won't do right by his son, I will. After we hung up, I sat motionless, overwhelmed by the ripple effects of Nicholas's actions. It wasn't just Alvin and me who were wounded by his betrayal. It was his parents, his friends, everyone who had believed in the man we thought he was. The next blow came in the mail. Credit card statements for accounts I didn't know existed. Nicholas had opened cards in his name but tied to our joint information, accumulating nearly $30,000 in debt over the past year. Hotel charges in cities he'd claimed to visit for business. Expensive restaurants. Jewelry from Tiffany's that had never been given to me. A paper trail of his affair with Trisha, funded by our family resources. I spread the statements across the table, piecing together the timeline of his deception. Charges. For weekend getaways began 8 months ago. Expensive dinners. A memorable charge from a lingerie boutique dated 2 days before my birthday. The day he'd come home empty-handed, claiming he'd been too swamped at work to shop. Nicole reviewed the statements, her expression grim. This strengthens the fraud case, but complicates recovery. These debts were incurred before your legal separation. Meaning? Meaning you might be liable for them. I pressed my palms against my eyes. He empties our accounts and I'm stuck with his debt? How is that possible? Marriage laws, she said simply. You need a lawyer, Maxine, a good one. A lawyer meant money I didn't have. But Nicole was right. I needed professional protection from whatever else Nicholas might have done. I contacted 3 attorneys before finding one who would accept a payment plan. Patricia Gladwell had built her practice representing women like me, blindsided by husbands who'd planned their exits with calculating precision. You're actually in better shape than many of my clients, she said after reviewing my documents. You have proof of forgery for the college fund withdrawal. That's criminal activity, not just bad behavior. Can we get it back? She tempered her response with practicality. We'll file for divorce immediately, citing abandonment and financial fraud. We'll get a court order freezing any domestic assets we can identify. But money that's already left the country? She shook her head. That's much harder to recover. I left her office with paperwork to complete, and a heaviness that had become my constant companion. The life I'd planned, the security I'd counted on, the future I'd envisioned for Alvin. All of it now hinged on legal proceedings and the slim hope of recovering what was rightfully ours. That evening, I found Alvin sitting at Nicholas's desk in the home office, carefully examining a framed photo of the three of us at the beach last summer. "Do you think he looks happy here?" he asked as I approached. I studied the image. Nicholas with his arm around me, Alvin perched on his shoulders, all of us smiling under a brilliant sun. We looked like the perfect family. Had it all been an act? "I think happiness is complicated," I said carefully. "Sometimes people smile when they're not happy inside." Alvin traced his father's face with one finger. "If I write him a letter, could we send it? Even if we don't know exactly where he is?" The hope in his voice broke my heart anew. "We can try, sweetheart, but I don't want you to be disappointed if he doesn't answer. I just want to tell him I'm sorry." "Sorry? For what?" He looked down, his voice small. "For whatever I did that made him leave." I knelt beside him, turning his face gently toward mine. "Alvin, listen to me. Your father didn't leave because of anything you did. Adults sometimes make selfish choices that hurt the people they're supposed to love. That's on them, not on you. Never on you." He nodded, but the doubt in his eyes remained. How many times would I need to repeat this truth before he believed it? And how could I convince him when I was still struggling to make sense of it myself? The new routine established itself with grinding persistence. Weekdays began at 5:30 a.m. as I prepared for my full-time position, packed Alvin's lunch, and reviewed my calendar for the second job that waited after dinner. Evenings were a blur of homework supervision, meal preparation, and then hours hunched over my laptop, managing financial reports for Maxine's foundation project. Weekends, once filled with family outings and lazy brunches, became compressed workdays and frantic attempts to maintain our home. I mowed the lawn Nicholas had always tended, learned to fix leaky faucets from YouTube tutorials, and tackled the mounting paperwork of our financial disaster. By Sunday nights, exhaustion settled into my bones like concrete. "You can't keep this pace," Maxine warned, watching me struggle to stay awake during our weekly dinner at her house. "You'll make yourself sick." "I don't have a choice," I said, forcing another bite of food I couldn't taste. "The attorney costs more than I expected, and Alvin needs new everything for school." She exchanged glances with her husband, Paul. "Move in with us. Just temporarily. We have the space, and it would." Cut your expenses. The offer was tempting, a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. But Alvin's therapist had emphasized the importance of maintaining stability. "I appreciate it, but Alvin needs his home right now. It's the only thing that hasn't changed." The changes were everywhere, impossible to ignore. The empty chair at the dinner table, the 2 quiet mornings without Nicholas's news commentary, the garage half filled without his car, the single toothbrush in the bathroom holder. I tried to fill these spaces with new routines. Friday became movie night, the two of us curled on the couch with popcorn and permission to stay up late. Sunday afternoons we baked together, the kitchen filled with the scent of cookies or bread instead of silence. Small traditions, fragile anchors in our storm-tossed life. Alvin adapted with the resilience only children possess, though moments of grief ambushed him without warning. He refused to remove the photos of Nicholas from his bedroom, but turned them face down when angry. He slept with his father's old sweater for weeks until the familiar scent faded. The most difficult moments came when other fathers appeared. At soccer games, watching teammates run to their dads for approval. At school events, where family projects emphasized the gap in our home. Once, spotting a man who resembled Nicholas in the grocery store, Alvin bolted down the aisle, only to return, crushed with disappointment. I learned to plan ahead for these triggers, arming myself with distractions and reassurances. I enlisted male figures in Alvin's life, his Uncle Paul, Coach Bennett, Rodney from work, to attend events, offer encouragement, demonstrate that men could be reliable. It wasn't the same, but it helped. The financial tightrope required constant vigilance. I created spreadsheets for every expense, tracking each dollar with precision born of necessity. When the water heater failed, I negotiated a payment plan with the repairman. When Alvin outgrew his winter coat, I found one at the consignment shop. When the car needed new tires, I bartered accounting services for a discount at the local garage. The college fund became my obsession. I opened a new account, automatically transferring small amounts, $25 here, $40 there, whenever I could squeeze them from our budget. The balance grew painfully slowly, a drop in the ocean of what Nicholas had taken, but it represented something vital: control. Proof that we could rebuild. The practical challenges of single parenthood emerged in unexpected ways. Who would watch Alvin when I had late meetings? What about school holidays that didn't align with my work schedule? How could I be in two places at once when he needed to be picked up from soccer practice while I was finishing a client project? I cobbled together a support network. A retired neighbor who adored Alvin and welcomed him after school. A carpool arrangement with other soccer moms. Flexible work hours negotiated with Rodney. Each solution was imperfect but sufficient, patches in the quilt of our new existence. 6 weeks after Nicholas left, Alvin came home from school with a permission slip for the father-son campout, an annual tradition he'd attended with Nicholas since kindergarten. He placed it on the counter without comment, but his eyes held a question he couldn't articulate. "Would you like to go this year?" I asked carefully. "Maybe with Uncle Paul?" He shook his head. "It wouldn't be the same." "We could do our own campout," I suggested. "Just us, in the backyard." A small smile appeared. "Could we make s'mores?" "All the s'mores you can eat," I promised. That weekend, we pitched the old tent Nicholas had stored in the garage, built a small fire in the fire pit, and slept under the stars. It wasn't the elaborate camping trip Nicholas would have planned, but Alvin laughed for the first time in weeks as we burned marshmallows and told ghost stories with flashlights under our chins. "This is better than the dad campout," he declared sleepily as we snuggled in sleeping bags. "Because you're more fun." I held him close, silently vowing to become whatever he needed: mother, father, provider, protector, even if it meant reinventing myself completely. The divorce proceedings crawled forward with excruciating slowness. Nicholas served papers. Through international channels, responded through an attorney, contesting everything despite his obvious abandonment. "It's a stalling tactic," Patricia explained during our monthly meeting. "He's hoping you'll run out of money for legal fees and accept a disadvantageous settlement." "What settlement?" "He took everything already. The house, future earnings, the debt he left behind. Without a proper divorce decree, you're still legally tied to whatever he does." The thought sent chills through me. Nicholas, free to accumulate more debt in paradise while I struggled to keep our lights on. "How do we speed this up?" "We don't," she said bluntly. "We stay the course and document everything. This is a marathon, not a sprint. A marathon I hadn't trained for, running on a path strewn with obstacles I hadn't anticipated." The investigation into Nicholas's financial fraud yielded small victories. The credit card companies removed some of the questionable charges after reviewing the evidence. The bank admitted liability for allowing the college fund withdrawal without proper verification and offered a partial reimbursement, a fraction of what was taken, but enough to replenish our emergency fund. The physical manifestations of stress emerged gradually: tension headaches that lingered for days, insomnia that left me staring at the ceiling, calculating figures until dawn, weight, loss that left my clothes hanging loosely. I ignored these warning signs, pushing through exhaustion with caffeine and determination. "Mom, are you sick?" Alvin asked one morning, studying my pale reflection as I helped him brush his teeth. "Just tired, sweetheart." "You're always tired now," he observed with a child's unfiltered honesty. That night, I studied myself in the bathroom, mirror, really looking at the person I was becoming. Beneath the exhaustion and worry, I glimpsed something unexpected: strength. Not the brittle, frantic energy of recent weeks, but something deeper: resilience forged in adversity. I was handling things I'd never imagined facing alone, making decisions without seeking approval, solving problems without deferring to Nicholas's judgment, finding resources within myself I hadn't known existed. The woman staring back at me was changing, adapting not just to survive, but to protect what mattered most. She wasn't just Nicholas's abandoned wife or Alvin's struggling mother. She was becoming someone new, someone tested by fire. 8 weeks after Nicholas left, I received a text from a different unknown number. "I miss you both. This is harder than I expected. Maybe we could talk?" My hands trembled as I read and reread the message. Nicholas, having second thoughts? The fantasy flashed unbidden. He would come back, return what he'd taken, restore our life to what it had been. But what had it been, really? A marriage where I'd been blind to his deception? A partnership where my trust had been weaponized against me? A future built on shifting sand? I showed the message to Maxine, seeking perspective I couldn't find alone. "What do you want to do?" she asked, her expression carefully neutral. "Part of me wants to respond," I admitted. "For Alvin's sake. For answers. And the other part?" I took a deep breath. "Is afraid of being hurt again, of looking weak, of undoing all the progress we've made." She squeezed my hand. "Trust your instincts. They're stronger than you realize." That night, after tucking Alvin in, I composed a response, deleted it, then wrote again. Finally, simple clarity emerged. "You made your choice. We're making ours. Any communication should go through my attorney." I pressed send, then blocked the bow. Number, sealing another crack in the foundation of our new life. October arrived with unexpected bills and complications. The property tax notice appeared in the mail, a staggering sum I'd forgotten to include in my budget calculations. The same week, Alvin outgrew his winter clothes, the refrigerator began making ominous noises, and the car's check engine light illuminated the dashboard like a mocking beacon. I sat at the kitchen table late one night, calculator in hand, trying to perform financial alchemy, turning insufficient funds into enough. The numbers refused to cooperate, no matter how I shifted them between columns. "Maybe we could skip the dentist appointments," I murmured to myself, erasing one expense only to find another that couldn't be delayed. Sleep deprivation clouded my thinking. Between the full-time job, the foundation project, and caring for Alvin, I averaged 4 hours of rest each night. Coffee had become less a pleasure than a medical necessity, my bloodstream more caffeine than plasma. My phone rang. Selena, calling despite the late hour. "I'm sorry to disturb you," she began, her voice tight. "But George had a fall. He's in the hospital." My hand tightened around the phone. "Is he okay?" "Broken hip. At his age." She didn't need to finish the sentence. We both knew the statistics for elderly patients with such injuries. "Can I do anything?" I offered automatically, even as my mind calculated the impossibility of adding hospital visits to our stretched schedule. "He's asking for Alvin," she said. "I know it's difficult with everything you're managing, but seeing his grandson might give him the will to fight through recovery." I closed my eyes, imagining explaining to my boss that I needed more time off, envisioning the foundation project deadlines I would miss, contemplating the cost of flights to Florida we couldn't afford. We'll come, I said, making the only decision my heart would allow. This weekend, after hanging up, I returned to my calculations with new urgency. The trip would require funds we didn't have, time we couldn't spare. But George had stood by us without hesitation. We would do the same for him. I listed items to sell. My wedding ring, untouched in its jewelry box since Nicholas left. The expensive camera equipment he'd bought for a hobby he quickly abandoned. The signed first editions I'd collected before marriage. Each represented memories and attachments I could no longer afford, literally or emotionally. By morning, I had cobbled together enough for 2 economy tickets. I called Rodney to request emergency family leave, rescheduled foundation deadlines, and arranged for a neighbor to collect our mail and water the plants. Telling Alvin about George was another challenge. He had already experienced too much loss. The possibility of losing his grandfather felt cruel. Great-Grandpa George is sick, I explained gently over breakfast. We're going to visit him this weekend. Alvin's fork paused midway to his mouth. Is he going to die? The directness of children, heartbreaking and refreshing simultaneously. The doctors are helping him, I said carefully. But he's very old, and his body doesn't heal as quickly as yours or mine. Alvin considered this with solemn intensity. Can I bring him my stuffed bear? When I'm sick, it makes me feel better. I blinked back sudden tears. I think he'd like that very much. The trip itself became a logistical obstacle course. Our flight was delayed, connection missed, luggage temporarily lost. We arrived at the hospital exhausted, only to learn visiting hours had ended. Selena met us in the lobby, her face lined with new worry. I convinced them to make an exception. Just 15 minutes. George looked smaller than I remembered, diminished, against the white hospital sheets. Tubes and monitors surrounded him, clinical reminders of his fragility. But his eyes brightened when Alvin approached, clutching his well-worn teddy bear. There's my boy, he said, his voice raspy but warm. Alvin, initially hesitant, moved closer. I brought you Bear. He helps when you don't feel good. George accepted the stuffed animal with grave dignity. That's very kind of you. I think he'll help me get strong again. They spoke for a few minutes about soccer and school, deliberately normal conversation in the most abnormal of settings. Then George beckoned me closer. Nicholas hasn't contacted you? He asked quietly while Alvin examined the hospital equipment with Selena. I shook my head. Nothing through proper channels. His lips tightened. I raised him better than this. You did, I agreed. This isn't a reflection on you or Selena? Has he reached out to Alvin at all? A card? A call? The question stung. No, nothing. George's weathered hand gripped mine with surprising strength. Then he's not the man I thought he was. And you're stronger than either of us knew. After returning to the hotel, Alvin fell asleep immediately, exhaustion overtaking him mid-sentence. I sat on the balcony, staring at the unfamiliar city lights, feeling disconnected from our life back home, yet unable to fully present in this moment either. My phone buzzed with an email notification from Patricia. Nicholas's attorney had filed a motion to dismiss the divorce proceedings, claiming insufficient evidence of abandonment. Photographs of him on a beach in Aruba with another. Women aren't sufficient, I muttered incredulously. The legal system's glacial pace and Byzantine requirements felt deliberately designed to protect those with resources to exploit them. Nicholas, comfortably settled in paradise with our money, could afford to drag this out indefinitely. I was the one rationing groceries and selling possessions to keep our utilities connected. The practical challenges multiplied like heads of a hydra. Cut one down, 2 more appeared. The hospital stay extended as George developed. Pneumonia. Our 2-day trip stretched to 4, then 6. Work deadlines accumulated. Bills awaited at home. Alvin missed a crucial math test. I called Nicole, desperate for any progress on recovering our finances. The international accounts are proving difficult to trace, she admitted. Nicholas converted much of the money to cryptocurrency before leaving. It's designed to be untraceable. So he gets away with it, I said flatly. Not necessarily. We're building a stronger case, but it takes time. Time we didn't have. Time during which Alvin grew taller, needed braces, approached college age. Time during which our financial foundation eroded further. We returned home to find a pipe had burst in the downstairs bathroom, flooding the hallway and ruining the carpet. The homeowner's insurance I'd carefully maintained covered most repairs, but the deductible, $1,500, might as well have been $15,000 for all my ability to pay it. I stood in the soggy hallway, water seeping into my shoes, and felt something inside me crack. Not a dramatic breakdown, but a quiet fracturing of whatever remained of my optimism. How much more could we absorb? How many more blows could our fragile new life withstand? That night, after arranging industrial fans to dry the carpet and scheduling repairs I couldn't afford, I found Alvin sitting in the kitchen, a determined expression on his face. "I've been thinking," he announced with precocious seriousness. "I'm going to help more." I managed a tired smile. "You already help a lot, sweetheart." He shook his head. "Real help. Mrs. Peterson next door said she'd pay me to walk her dog every day, and Mr. Gonzalez needs someone to water his plants when he travels." My heart squeezed painfully. "Alvin, that's very grown-up thinking, but—" "I know we don't have a lot of money," he interrupted. "I hear you talking on the phone. I see how worried you are." His small fingers traced patterns on the tabletop. "Dad took our money, and now things are hard." I sat beside him, struggling to find the right balance between honesty and protection. "Things are a bit tight right now, yes. But that's for me to worry about, not you." "I'm not a baby," he insisted. "I can help." The stubborn set of his jaw reminded me painfully of Nicholas in the early days, when his determination had seemed like strength rather than selfishness. But Alvin's motivation came from a place of love, not ego. "How about this?" I suggested. "You focus on school and being a kid. That's your most important job right now. If you want to earn some spending money with small chores for the neighbors, we can work something out that doesn't interfere with homework or activities." He considered this compromise, then nodded solemnly. "Deal." As I tucked him in that night, he whispered, "We're going to be okay, Mom, I promise." My 10-year-old son, offering me reassurance instead of seeking it. Both heartbreaking and strengthening. The practical challenges continued to mount. The car needed repairs I couldn't postpone. The health insurance premiums increased. The heating system required maintenance before winter. Each obstacle demanded immediate attention, immediate funds, immediate solutions. I developed a triage system for our financial emergencies, distinguishing between critical, medication, mortgage, important, car repairs, utilities, and deferrable, new clothes, home maintenance. The third category grew continuously, small, issues compounding into larger problems I would eventually have to address. Through it all, I maintained a facade of confidence for Alvin's sake. Yes, we were having spaghetti again because it was economical, not because the refrigerator contained nothing else. Yes, I was working late because I enjoyed the foundation project, not because we desperately needed the extra income. Yes, I was selling furniture because we were decluttering, not because the property tax bill was due. But children perceive more than we credit them for. One evening, Alvin placed his piggy bank on the table as I reviewed bills. "You can have this if you need it," he said simply. Inside was $43.76, saved from birthday money and small chores. It wouldn't solve our problems, wouldn't even make a dent, but the gesture itself was priceless. I pulled him into a fierce hug. "Thank you, but this is your money. You've earned it." "But we're a team," he said, echoing words I'd repeated like a mantra since Nicholas left. "Teams share." Winter arrived with brutal efficiency, turning our already challenging situation into something that bordered on impossible. The heating bills doubled, then tripled as temperatures plummeted. Our aging furnace struggled to maintain warmth in the drafty house Nicholas had always promised to better insulate next year. I found myself setting the thermostat lower each week, 68 degrees, then 65, then 62, layering sweaters and distributing extra blankets to compensate. At night, Alvin and I huddled in the living room with a space heater, watching movies under a mound of quilts, pretending it was cozy rather than necessary. "Mom, why is it always cold now?" Alvin asked one evening, his breath visible in his bedroom as I tucked him in. "The furnace is being a little stubborn," I explained, avoiding the harder truth, that choosing between adequate heat and paying the mortgage was now my reality. The physical toll of our new life became impossible to ignore. Persistent exhaustion transformed into something deeper, a bone-deep weariness that caffeine couldn't touch. I caught every virus that circulated through Alvin's school, my immune system weakened by stress and insufficient rest. A simple cold became bronchitis, lingering for weeks because I couldn't afford to take sick days. At work, maintaining the appearance of competence required increasing effort. I found myself staring at spreadsheets, numbers blurring before my eyes, requiring 3 reads to comprehend what once would have been immediately clear. Rodney noticed, his concern evident in the gentle way he returned work for corrections I should never have needed. "Maxine, when was the last time you took a real break?" he asked after finding me asleep at my desk during lunch. I couldn't remember. Every waking moment was allocated to survival. Working, caring for Alvin, maintaining our home, fighting the legal battles that continued to drain our resources. Even sleep offered no respite, filled with anxiety, dreams about unpaid bills, and Nicholas laughing from a distant beach. My second job with the foundation project grew more demanding as deadlines approached. I worked until 2 a.m. most nights, only to rise at 5:30 for the next day's marathon. The additional income was essential, but the cost to my health became increasingly evident. Then came the school incident. The call from the principal arrived during an important client meeting. "Mrs. Walsh, there's been a situation with Alvin. He's not hurt, but we need you to come in immediately." I found Alvin sitting outside the principal's office, knuckles bruised, uniform disheveled, his expression a mixture of defiance and shame I'd never seen before. "He punched another student," Principal Sharma explained once we were seated in her office. "Repeatedly. It took 2 teachers to separate them." I stared at my gentle son, unable to reconcile this report with the boy who cried over injured birds and gave his allowance to animal shelters. "Alvin, what happened?" I asked, keeping my voice measured despite my shock. He studied his hands, silent. The principal sighed. "The other student, Tyler, apparently made some comments about Alvin's father." My stomach dropped. "What kind of comments?" "That his dad left because he didn't want a loser for a son," Alvin muttered, still not looking up. "That we're poor now because dad took all our money to be with someone better." The cruelty of children, often unconsciously echoing adult conversations, overheard at home, wielding words like weapons without fully understanding their impact. "Violence is never acceptable," Principal Sharma said firmly. "However, given the circumstances and Alvin's previously spotless record, we're issuing a 3-day suspension rather than the usual 5. A suspension, another obstacle in our already complicated schedule. 3 days I would need to work from home while supervising a troubled 10-year-old. 3 days of explaining to Rodney why I couldn't be in the office. 3 days of falling further behind on the foundation project. In the car, Alvin finally broke his silence. "I'm sorry, Mom. I know you're disappointed." "I'm not angry about the suspension," I said carefully. "I'm worried about you. This isn't like you, Alvin." "Tyler wouldn't stop," he explained, his voice small. "He kept saying Dad left because I wasn't good enough. That you were going to leave too when you got tired of having no money. The words struck with physical force. Children absorbed everything, not just our spoken reassurances, but our whispered phone calls, our tense expressions when bills arrived, our careful economies at the grocery store. You know that's not true, I said, reaching for his hand. Your father's choices were about him, not you. And I am never, ever leaving you. But what if something happens to you? His voice cracked. What if you get sick or hurt? Who will take care of me then? The question revealed the deeper fear beneath his outburst, not just the cruelty of a classmate, but the fundamental insecurity that had taken root since Nicholas's abandonment. If one parent could vanish, why not both? I pulled into our driveway and turned to face him fully. Listen to me, Alvin. I have made arrangements. If anything ever happened to me, which it won't, you would never be alone. Aunt Maxine and Uncle Paul would take care of you. Grandma Selena, too. You have people who love you, a whole network of support. He nodded, not entirely convinced, but willing to accept the reassurance for now. That night, I updated my will, named official guardians, and wrote detailed instructions for Alvin's care. Not because I expected disaster, but because my son needed the security of knowing contingency plans existed. His world had been shattered once. I would not leave any possibility for it to happen again. The suspension created a cascade of complications. I negotiated with Rodney to work remotely, moved foundation project meetings to evening video calls, and tried to use the unexpected time with Alvin constructively. We talked more openly about his feelings regarding Nicholas's absence, his fears, about our financial situation, his concerns about the future. Sometimes I hate him, Alvin admitted during a walk through the neighborhood park. Is that bad? Feelings aren't good or bad, I said, choosing my words carefully. They just are. It's okay to be angry with your dad. Do you hate him? The question deserved honesty. Sometimes I'm very angry. Other times I'm sad about the family we lost. Mostly I'm focused on moving forward with you. He considered this, kicking at fallen leaves. Tyler said his mom said Dad ran off with a younger woman because you let yourself go. Another barb, this one aimed at me. The neighborhood gossip had evolved apparently from pity to judgment. Adults sometimes look for simple explanations for complicated situations, I said, swallowing my humiliation. Your father made choices that hurt us, but those choices reflect on his character, not on us. When Alvin returned to school, I requested a meeting with his teacher and the school counselor. We developed strategies for handling future comments about his family situation, emphasizing communications rather than physical responses. Alvin needs healthy outlets for his emotions, the counselor suggested. Sports, art, anything that allows him to process what he's feeling. I nodded, mentally calculating what activities we could afford. The swimming lessons he loved had been cut months ago. The art classes at the community center conflicted with my work schedule. Every solution seemed to require resources, time, or money that had become precious commodities. As December approached, the prospect of Christmas loomed like a shadow. Our first holiday without Nicholas, without financial comfort, without the traditions that had defined our family celebrations. Alvin had already scaled back his expectations, his Christmas list notably modest compared to previous years. Santa knows we don't have much money now, he explained with heartbreaking pragmatism when I asked about his abbreviated wishes. I was determined to create new traditions, to build joy from our stripped-down circumstances. But each day brought new challenges that eroded my resolve. The car's transmission warning light, another legal bill from Patricia, the notification that my health insurance premiums would increase again in January. The weight of single parenthood, financial precarity, and constant uncertainty had become almost unbearable. Yet bearing it was my only option. For Alvin, for our future, for the life I was determined to rebuild from the ashes Nicholas had left behind. The Christmas season brought a crystallization of our new reality. Holiday cards arrived addressed only to Alvin and me, Nicholas's name conspicuously absent. Party invitations decreased, whether from friends' discomfort with our changed circumstances or my own inability to reciprocate hospitality. The social fabric of our lives had quietly unraveled. Couples who had been regulars in our home now offered vague excuses when I suggested coffee. Mothers who had once sought my help with PTA projects now handled things without consulting me. The isolation wasn't dramatic, but incremental, a gradual pruning of connections that had once seemed essential. "Are we still going to the Hendersons' New Year's party?" Alvin asked one evening, referring to an annual tradition with Nicholas's work colleagues. "I don't think we were invited this year," I said carefully, having noticed the absence of the usual embossed invitation. "Because Dad's gone? Because situations change, honey. We'll do something special. Just us." I didn't tell him about running into James Henderson at the grocery store, his awkward greeting and hasty explanation that this year's party was just a small gathering. Nor did I mention overhearing his wife telling another shopper that they'd had to make some tough decisions. About the guest list, the message was clear. We had been Nicholas's connection to that social circle, not independent members of the community. More painful was the gradual withdrawal of my own parents. They lived 3 hours away and had initially been supportive, offering money I'd reluctantly accepted and weekend visits that provided brief respite. But as months passed, their assistance came with increasingly pointed commentary. "Have you considered selling the house? It seems excessive for just the two of you," my father suggested during their December visit. "Alvin needs stability, right?" "Now," I explained, the same answer I'd given previously. My mother exchanged glances with him. "Stability is important, of course, but practicality matters too. Your situation has changed." "I'm aware," I said, tension creeping into my voice. "We're just concerned," she continued, arranging Christmas ornaments on our smaller tree with unnecessary precision. "You look exhausted. The house needs maintenance you can't afford, and you're working yourself to illness trying to maintain a lifestyle that isn't sustainable." "It's not a lifestyle, Mom. It's our home." She sighed, the sound heavy with unspoken criticism. "Nicholas made terrible choices. No one's disputing that. But at some point, you need to accept reality and adjust accordingly." The conversation deteriorated from there, old patterns reasserting themselves. My mother had always prioritized pragmatism over emotion, had always believed in facing facts rather than fighting them. In her view, I was being stubborn rather than strong, clinging to pride rather than embracing sensible compromise. They left earlier than planned, the visit ending with stilted hugs and promises to call that felt emptier than before. After they drove away, I found myself standing in the kitchen, a profound loneliness settling over me despite Alvin's presence upstairs. The fracturing of relationships extended beyond family and friends. My faith in institutions eroded as I encountered system after system designed to protect those with resources while punishing those without. Banks that had eagerly granted loans when Nicholas's income supported us now declined my applications despite my perfect payment history. Insurance companies raised premiums based on my single status. Creditors hounded me for joint debts while Nicholas remained beyond their reach. Even my relationship with Alvin faced new strains. His behavior fluctuated between clingy dependence and angry withdrawal. Some days he followed me from room to room, panic flashing in his eyes if I was out of sight too long. Other days he retreated into monosyllabic responses and closed doors, testing whether I too would eventually abandon him. "Why can't we just move?" he demanded after a particularly difficult day at school, where Tyler's taunting had resumed despite administrative intervention. "Everyone here knows about Dad. Everyone knows we're poor now." "We're not poor," I corrected gently. We're adjusting, and running away wouldn't solve our problems. You just don't want to admit Dad won, he muttered, stabbing at his dinner. He gets to be happy in Aruba while we're stuck here being miserable. The assessment struck uncomfortably close to my own darkest thoughts. Was I stubbornly remaining in place out of pride? Was my determination to maintain our home actually harmful to Alvin? The most unexpected relationship fracture came from Selena. After George's hospitalization, she had returned to Florida to care for him, our communication limited to brief phone calls and sporadic updates. In early January, she called with news. "George is coming home next week," she said, relief evident in her voice. "The doctors say he's stable enough for home care." "That's wonderful," I replied sincerely. "Alvin will be so happy to hear it." A pause followed, weighted with unspoken tension. "There's something else, Maxine. Nicholas contacted us." My hand tightened around the phone. "When?" "Christmas Day. He sent flowers to George in the hospital and called to check on him. The timing felt calculated, reaching out when emotion would be highest, when a gesture might carry maximum impact with minimum effort. Did he ask about Alvin? I couldn't stop myself from asking. Another pause. He mentioned him, yes. He'd like to speak with him. The request activated every protective instinct I possessed. Absolutely not. Not after months of silence. Not without going through proper channels. Selena's voice hardened slightly. He's still Alvin's father, Maxine. Despite everything. A father who abandoned his son without a word. A father who hasn't sent so much as a birthday card or child support payment. A father who is actively fighting the divorce proceedings that would provide stability for Alvin's future. People make mistakes, she said, her loyalty to her son asserting itself despite her previous support of us. Nicholas says he regrets how he handled things, that he panicked. Panicked? He methodically emptied our accounts over weeks, forged my signature, and disappeared with another woman. That's not panic, Selena. That's premeditated betrayal. The conversation ended with strained politeness, but the fracture was evident. Selena's maternal instinct to believe in her son's redemption had overridden her recognition of his wrongdoing. I couldn't blame her entirely. The need to believe in those we love runs deep, but I couldn't risk Alvin's emotional well-being on Nicholas's sudden, convenient regret. That night, I sat Alvin down for another difficult conversation. Your father contacted great-grandma and great-grandpa, I explained carefully. He may try to contact you as well. Alvin's eyes widened, a complex mixture of emotions crossing his face. He wants to talk to me? He says he does. But I need you to understand something important. Your father made choices that hurt us very badly. If he wants to be part of your life again, there needs to be a proper process. We can't just pretend nothing happened. What if he says he's sorry? What if he wants to come home? The hope in his voice broke my heart. Despite everything, he still yearned for his father's return, for the restoration of our family. Things can't go back to how they were before, I said gently. Too much has happened. But if your father is truly sorry, if he really wants to make things right, he needs to show that through actions, not just words. That means returning what he took, supporting you properly, and going through the legal system instead of trying to bypass it. Alvin considered this, his young face serious. And if he calls me? You can talk to him if you want to. I won't prevent that. But I'd like to be present, and I'd like you to tell me immediately. He nodded, then asked the question I'd been dreading. Do you think he really misses me? How to answer truthfully without crushing his spirit. How to acknowledge the reality of Nicholas's character without destroying Alvin's sense of self-worth. I think, I said carefully, that anyone who truly knows you would miss you terribly. You are an extraordinary person, Alvin. Anyone who doesn't see that is missing something important in themselves. That night, I lay awake reviewing the relationships that had fractured in the aftermath of Nicholas's abandonment. Some breaks had been unexpected. Friends I'd thought would stand by us who had drifted away. Others were perhaps inevitable, the tensions with my parents reflecting long-standing patterns exacerbated by crisis. But the most significant fracture was internal. My relationship with the woman I had been before, the trusting partner who had believed in the security of our life together. That woman was gone, replaced by someone more cautious, more self-reliant, more aware of life's fundamental instability. I wasn't sure yet whether this transformation represented growth or damage. Perhaps it was both. The painful evolution that follows when foundations crumble and rebuilding becomes the only option. January brought a bitter cold snap, and with it, a sense of isolation that went beyond the physical confinement of winter weather. The holiday season had ended, taking with it the temporary distractions of festivities and forced cheerfulness. What remained was the stark reality of our situation. A house that felt too large, bills that grew more oppressive, and a silence that expanded to fill the spaces Nicholas had once occupied. My birthday arrived mid-month, a day I had hoped would pass unnoticed. Alvin, however, had other plans. I woke to find a handmade card on my nightstand, decorated with careful illustrations of the two of us holding hands. "Happy birthday to the best mom," he had written in his precise script. "We don't need anyone else." The message carried both comfort and heartache. I found him in the kitchen, attempting to make pancakes, flour dusting his pajamas and determination etched on his face. "I wanted to surprise you," he explained as I helped him clean up the batter that had missed the bowl. "Dad always made you breakfast on your birthday." The comment, innocent yet laden with memories, highlighted the depth of our isolation. Birthdays had once been family celebrations, with Nicholas orchestrating elaborate surprises and Alvin serving as his enthusiastic accomplice. Now, my 10-year-old was struggling to fill the gap with his limited resources, shouldering responsibilities no child should bear. The isolation deepened as winter progressed. Practical constraints limited our social interactions. Gas for non-essential, trips had become a luxury. Invitations to events requiring gifts were politely declined, and evening activities conflicted with my second job. Gradually, the invitations themselves dwindled, the world continuing its orbit while we remained suspended in the aftermath of Nicholas's betrayal. Even Maxine's previously constant presence diminished as her own life presented challenges. Her husband received a promotion requiring extensive travel, leaving her to manage their household alone. Her foundation work intensified with year-end reporting. The frequency of her visits decreased from several times weekly to once a week, then to sporadic check-ins. "I feel like I'm failing you," she admitted during a rare coffee date. "You've got so much on your plate, and I'm not there enough." "You have your own life," I reassured her, hiding my disappointment beneath pragmatism. "I can't expect you to carry our burdens indefinitely." "But that's what family does," she protested. The truth was more complicated. Even the most devoted support systems couldn't sustain crisis-level assistance permanently. People needed to return to their own priorities, their own challenges. The initial surge of help following Nicholas's departure had been genuine, but ultimately temporary, a reality I was learning to accept. The legal isolation proved even more disheartening. Patricia called with updates that felt increasingly like non-updates. Motions filed and countered, hearings scheduled and rescheduled, deadlines extended as Nicholas's legal team exploited every procedural opportunity to delay resolution. "The system favors those with resources," Patricia explained after another postponement. "Your husband can afford to drag this out. Each delay costs him nothing while draining your finances. So justice is only available to those who can pay for it," I said bitterly. "I wouldn't put it so bluntly, but there's an element of truth there. We're making progress, though." the judges growing impatient with their tactics, progress measured in inches while we needed miles. The deepest isolation came from within. I had always been someone who processed thoughts through conversation, who sought connection and validation through shared experiences. Now, I carried worries I couldn't voice aloud without frightening Alvin or burdening already taxed relationships. At night, alone in a bed that still felt too empty despite months of solo occupancy, I battled insomnia and anxiety without the comfort of another person's breathing beside me. The mundane decisions of daily life, what to cook for dinner, whether to repair the leaking faucet now or later, how to handle Alvin's growing emotional needs, fell entirely on my shoulders, with no one to share the mental load. Even my body felt like a stranger, transformed by stress and insufficient self-care. I caught glimpses of myself in mirrors and windows, momentarily startled by the shadowed eyes and angular face that had replaced my former appearance. Weight had fallen away. Clothes hung loosely, and a perpetual tension resided in my shoulders and jaw. One evening, attempting to fix the garage door opener rather than pay for a repair service, I dropped a heavy tool on my foot. The pain was immediate and intense, bringing tears to my eyes. I sat on the cold concrete, cradling my injured foot, and something broke inside me, not physically, but emotionally. I began to cry, not just from the pain, but from everything. The exhaustion, the fear, the overwhelming responsibility, the profound aloneness. Alvin found me there, his expression alarmed at the sight of his usually composed mother sobbing on the garage floor. "Mom, are you okay? Should I call someone?" The question highlighted our isolation. Who would he call? Who was left in our diminished circle who could drop everything to help with a minor injury and a major breakdown? "I'm fine, honey," I managed, wiping my face. "Just hurt my foot. It'll be okay." He sat beside me, his small hand finding mine. "You don't have to pretend," he said with unexpected insight. "I know you're sad sometimes." His perception both touched and concerned me. Children shouldn't have to comfort their parents, shouldn't have to witness adult vulnerability so raw and unfiltered. Yet here we were, each the other's primary support, the boundary between parent and child blurred by necessity. "I am sad sometimes," I admitted, "but I'm also very grateful for you. You make everything worthwhile." He nodded, accepting this truth. "We take care of each other." The moment became a turning point in our isolation. We stopped pretending everything was normal, stopped maintaining the fiction that our situation was temporary or easily managed. Instead, we acknowledged our reality. We were largely on our own, facing challenges that wouldn't disappear with wishful thinking or external rescue. This acknowledgement brought an unexpected form of liberation. If no one was coming to save us, we would save ourselves. If the systems designed to protect families like ours were failing, we would create our own systems. If financial security seemed impossibly distant, we would redefine what security meant. Began seeking practical knowledge instead of emotional support. YouTube tutorials replaced conversations with friends as I learned to handle home repairs, basic car maintenance, and financial management skills Nicholas had always controlled. Online forums for single parents provided strategies and validation from strangers who understood our struggles intimately. Alvin and I established new routines tailored to our actual circumstances rather than preserved from our previous life. Sunday mornings became project time when we tackled household tasks together. Friday evenings featured homemade pizza and board games instead of expensive outings. We converted Nicholas's home office into a shared space where I could work while Alvin did homework, each of us drawing comfort from the other's presence. The isolation remained, but its character changed from something imposed upon us to something we navigated with increasing confidence. We became more self-sufficient, more resilient, more capable of finding joy in small victories and meaning in our two-person team. One Friday afternoon, emerging from the isolation of winter, I received a letter from Nicholas's attorney. Inside was a settlement offer. Nicholas would provide a lump sum payment significantly smaller than what he had taken, in exchange for expedited divorce proceedings and limited future financial obligations. "It's insulting," Patricia said when I called her. "He's offering pennies on the dollar of what he stole, essentially buying his freedom from responsibility." "What are our alternatives?" I asked, pragmatism overtaking principle. "We continue fighting. Push for full financial disclosure, potentially recover more through the courts. But realistically, that could take years." The choice crystallized the essence of our isolation. No system, legal, financial, or social, would fully restore what Nicholas had taken. No external force would create perfect justice. The decision rested entirely with me. Accept an inadequate settlement that provided immediate resources and closure, or continue a protracted battle on principle, extending our period of uncertainty and stress. I sat at the kitchen table that night after Alvin, went to bed, calculator in hand, weighing options that all felt insufficient. The isolation of decisive responsibility weighed heavily. This choice would impact our future significantly, yet I had no one with whom to truly share the burden of making it. As I deliberated, I realized that isolation had fundamentally changed my perspective. 6 months earlier, I might have rejected the settlement outright, clinging to the principle that Nicholas should pay fully for his betrayal. Now, I understood that closure and stability held their own value, perhaps greater than the satisfaction of eventually winning. The woman Nicholas had abandoned, trusting, conflict-averse, defined by her relationship, might have made a different choice. But that woman no longer existed. In her place stood someone forged in isolation, someone who had learned that survival sometimes required difficult compromises, and that justice rarely arrived in perfect packages. I reached for the phone to call Patricia. My decision was made. Our isolation had been painful, but it had also been transformative. We would accept the settlement, take what we could salvage, and move forward rather than remaining tethered to battles we couldn't fully win. For the first time in months, I slept without interruption, the decision bringing an unexpected peace. The isolation had taught us self-reliance. Perhaps it was time to use that strength to chart a new course rather than fighting endlessly for what was lost. February arrived with unexpected mail, an official-looking envelope from the county treasurer's office. Inside was a property tax reassessment notice indicating our home's value had decreased significantly due to market conditions in our neighborhood. The resulting tax reduction wouldn't solve our financial problems, but it represented the first piece of genuinely good news in months. I stood in the kitchen, holding the notice, feeling a small lightness in my chest. Perhaps the universe wasn't entirely aligned against us after all. That same afternoon, Rodney called me into his office. I braced myself for criticism. My work had suffered despite my best efforts, attention to detail compromised by exhaustion and divided focus. "Maxine, the Barton account is impressed with your work on their audit," he began, surprising me completely. "They've specifically requested you handle their portfolio moving forward." "Really?" The skepticism in my voice was impossible to hide. "Really," he confirmed with a smile. "It comes with a management designation and salary increase. 15%, effective immediately." I sank into the chair opposite his desk, momentarily speechless. The raise wouldn't restore what Nicholas had taken, but it would create breathing room in our strangled budget. More importantly, it represented recognition of my capabilities independent of my personal circumstances. "There's one more thing," Rodney continued. "I know you've been working a second job with your sister's foundation. This promotion would require more focus here, but comes with flexibility. You could work from home 2 days a week, which might help with your schedule." The thoughtfulness of the arrangement, addressing both our financial needs and the practical challenges of single parenthood, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Thank you," I managed, embarrassed by the emotion. This means more than you. No, he nodded, understanding more than I'd realized. My mother raised 4 kids alone after my father left. I know what you're dealing with. The company benefits from your talent. We just needed to make it work for your reality, too. As I left his office, clutching the official letter with my new title and salary, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: hope. Not the desperate, clinging hope that things might magically improve, but the substantial hope that comes from tangible progress. That weekend, another form of unexpected support arrived. Nicole called with news about our financial investigation. "We've located one of Nicholas's offshore accounts," she said, her voice animated with rare excitement. "It was opened 6 months before he left, which strengthens the fraud case substantially." "Can we recover anything from it?" "That's the good part. The account is still active, with approximately $12,000 remaining. We've obtained a court order to freeze it pending the outcome of your divorce settlement. Not a fortune, but enough to make a difference. Enough to rebuild a modest emergency fund. Enough to prove Nicholas wasn't as clever as he thought." "There's more," Nicole continued. "Trisha Morgan has returned to the States. Alone." The information took a moment to process. "They split up?" "Apparently. She's taken a position with a firm in Chicago, started 2 weeks ago. My contact says she's been cooperating with some inquiries regarding Nicholas's financial activities. The implications were significant. Trisha might have information about other hidden accounts, about Nicholas's current whereabouts, about plans they had made together before reality intervened." "Why would she help us?" I asked, suspicious of convenient developments after so many. "Setbacks. Self-preservation, most likely. If she knowingly participated in financial fraud, she could face legal consequences. Cooperation mitigates that risk." I thanked Nicole and hung up, processing this potential ally from the most unexpected quarter. The woman who had participated in destroying my family might now help us recover some measure of security. The irony wasn't lost on me. Monday morning brought another surprise when Alvin's principal called. "Mrs. Walsh, I wanted to let you know about a scholarship opportunity," she began. "The district has a program for students facing significant life changes. It would cover Alvin's after-school care and summer enrichment programs completely. The assistance would eliminate a major strain on our budget while providing Alvin with activities I couldn't otherwise afford. More importantly, it would give him structured time with peers and mentors during hours I needed to work." "How did you know we needed this?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Your son's counselor recommended him. She's been impressed with his resilience but concerned about the pressure he puts on himself. She thought this might help maintain his academic progress while relieving some of the isolation he's experiencing." The observation was perceptive. Alvin had been shouldering adult worries, withdrawing from friends to avoid questions about our situation, declining birthday party invitations that would require gifts we couldn't afford. "Thank you," I said, swallowing past the lump in my throat. "We would be grateful for the opportunity." Support emerged from other unexpected directions. Our elderly neighbor, Mr. Gonzalez, appeared one Saturday morning with tools and determination. "Your gutters need cleaning before spring rains," he announced matter-of-factly. "Alvin mentioned it was on your list. I've got the ladder and experience." Before I could protest, he had recruited 2 other neighbors and organized an impromptu work party. By afternoon, not only were the gutters cleared, but the leaky kitchen faucet was repaired, burnt-out exterior lights replaced, and a wobbly railing on the back steps secured. I tried to pay them, but Mr. Gonzalez waved away my offer. "My wife died 10 years ago," he said quietly. "The neighbors showed up with casseroles and help for months. That's what community means. Today it's your turn to receive. Someday you'll be the one showing up for someone else." His perspective shifted something inside me. I had been viewing assistance as charity, as evidence of our reduced circumstances. He reframed it as participation in a natural cycle of community support, sometimes giving, sometimes receiving, all of us connected by the understanding that life brings challenges no one should face entirely alone. Even Selena, whose relationship with me had fractured over Nicholas's attempted contact, found her way back to support. She called one evening, her voice tentative. "I've been thinking about our last conversation," she began. "You were right about Nicholas. I wanted to believe he had changed, but his actions speak louder than words." "What happened?" I asked, sensing a story behind her reversal. "He asked his father for money, claimed he needed it for legal fees to fix things with you and Alvin. When George questioned him about returning what he took from you first, Nicholas became angry, said some unforgivable things. The revelation wasn't surprising, but validated my instincts about Nicholas's attempts at contact. Not genuine remorse, just another angle for manipulation. "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. No mother should have to acknowledge such truths about her child. "I'm the one who's sorry," Selena replied. "I should have been a better support to you and Alvin. If you'll allow it, I'd like to try again." Her humility touched me. "Alvin would love to see you. And honestly, so would I." The following weekend, she visited, bringing not just presents for Alvin but practical support for me. A gift card for groceries, offers to help with childcare, and most valuably, emotional validation of the challenges we faced. Perhaps the most unexpected support came through Alvin's school project. His class was studying community heroes, and he had chosen first responders as his topic. The assignment required interviewing someone in the field. "Ms. Winters knows a firefighter who might talk to me," he explained. "Her name is Nicole Franklin. She's coming to our class tomorrow." The project sparked Alvin's enthusiasm in a way I hadn't seen since Nicholas left. He prepared questions, read books about firefighting, and talked animatedly about careers in emergency services. When Ms. Winters called to ask if Nicole could drive him home after their interview, I agreed gratefully, appreciating the mentor's interest in my son. Nicole Franklin turned out to be not just any firefighter, but the station captain, a woman in her late 30s with an easy manner and natural rapport with children. She appeared on our doorstep with Alvin chattering beside her, his face alight with excitement. "Your son is quite the interviewer," she said with a warm smile. "Most kids ask about sliding down poles and driving the truck. He wanted to know about stress management and community outreach programs." "That sounds like Alvin," I agreed, inviting her in for coffee. Over the next hour, I learned Nicole was a single parent herself, raising a 13-year-old daughter while managing her demanding career. She spoke candidly about the challenges, offering practical advice without minimizing difficulties. "The hardest part for me was accepting that I couldn't do it all perfectly," she admitted. "Some days good enough has to be enough." The permission to be imperfect, to acknowledge limitations without shame, felt revolutionary. Here was someone who understood our reality, who had navigated similar waters and emerged successful but honest about the journey's difficulties. As she was leaving, she handed me a business card. "The department has a youth program starting next month. Activities, mentoring, life skills. Alvin would be perfect for it. And the parents have their own support network. Think about it." The offer represented more than activities for Alvin or networking for me. It suggested belonging, a community where our situation wasn't unusual or defining, where single-parent families were the norm rather than the exception. That night, reviewing the unexpected support that had materialized when I least expected it, I realized something important. We had never truly been alone. The isolation I had felt so acutely was partly circumstantial, but also partly perceptual. My own reluctance to accept help, to acknowledge need, to connect from a position of vulnerability rather than strength. As I tucked Alvin in, he said something that crystallized this understanding. "Mom, remember when you said we were a team, just the two of us?" I nodded, recalling the desperate reassurance offered in our darkest moments. I think our team is getting bigger, he observed sleepily. And that's okay, right? Yes, I said, smoothing his hair. That's more than okay. That's exactly what we need. The unexpected support wouldn't solve all our problems. Nicholas had still taken what wasn't his to take. The legal system still moved with glacial slowness. Financial recovery remained a long, arduous path. But the emergence of allies and assistants from unexpected quarters had changed something fundamental in our outlook. We were no longer facing these challenges in isolation. We had begun to build a network, different from what we had before, perhaps stronger for being deliberately chosen rather than circumstantially acquired. Not a replacement for what was lost, but something new and valuable in its own right. March arrived with unexpected momentum. The settlement negotiations with Nicholas's attorneys had stalled again, but Patricia called with news that changed our trajectory completely. The judge has ordered an asset freeze, she announced, triumph evident in her voice. Based on the evidence of fraud and the offshore account Nicole identified, the court has frozen all Nicholas's known financial holdings pending the final divorce decree. What does that mean exactly? I asked, afraid to hope after so many disappointments. It means he can't continue moving money around to hide it. It means we have leverage for the first time. His attorney called this morning wanting to expedite resolution, code for Nicholas is finally feeling the pressure. The breakthrough wasn't just practical, but psychological. For months, Nicholas had operated with impunity, enjoying our resources while we struggled with the consequences of his actions. Now, finally, the scales of justice were beginning to balance. There's more, Patricia continued. Tricia Morgan has provided documentation of additional accounts in the Cayman Islands. She claims Nicholas told her the money was from investment returns, not your family's savings. When she discovered the truth, it contributed to their breakup. Absorbed this information, processing its implications. So she's positioning herself as another victim? Essentially. Her attorney is negotiating immunity from potential fraud charges in exchange for her cooperation. Regardless of her motives, her information is valuable to us. The revelations triggered a cascade of progress. Within days, we received confirmation of 3 previously unknown accounts containing approximately $72,000. Not the entire amount Nicholas had taken, but a substantial portion. The court ordered immediate transfer of these funds to an escrow account pending final settlement. When the first deposit appeared in our newly established account, $32,250, I stared at the figure on the computer screen, momentarily unable to process what I was seeing. After months of pinching pennies, of calculating to the dollar how much gas we could afford, of deferring medical appointments and home repairs, the amount seemed almost unreal. I called Patricia immediately. Can I use this money now, or is it still tied up somehow? It's yours, she confirmed. The judge specifically released these initial funds for your use, given the financial hardship you've experienced. That evening, I sat with Alvin at the kitchen table, a notepad between us. We need to make some decisions, I explained. Some of Dad's money has been returned to us. His eyes widened. All of it? Not all, but enough to make things better. I want you to help me decide how to use it. We made 3 columns on the paper: need, want, and future. Under need went the practical necessities we'd deferred. The car's overdue maintenance, the house's failing water heater, proper winter, clothes for Alvin's rapidly growing frame, and the establishment of a proper emergency fund. Want contained modest indulgences, pizza delivery instead of homemade for our Friday tradition, new soccer equipment for Alvin, a spa day for me to address the tension headaches that had become chronic companions. Future held our most important priority, rebuilding Alvin's college fund with an initial deposit of $20,000. Is that really going to be enough? Alvin asked, studying the paper with unusual seriousness for a child his age. College costs a lot. It's a start, I explained. We'll add to it over time, and there are scholarships, grants, and other options when the time comes. The important thing is that we're back on track." He nodded, then pointed to the want column with unexpected insistence. "You should get new clothes too, not just me. All your stuff is old and too big now." His observation startled me. I had lost weight from stress and overwork, but hadn't prioritized replacing clothes that now hung loosely on my frame. Somehow my 10-year-old had noticed what I'd overlooked in the daily rush of survival. "Okay," I agreed, adding it to the list. New clothes for both of us. That weekend brought our first shopping trip in nearly a year that wasn't strictly limited to necessities. We approached it methodically, still conscious of value and practicality, but with the novel luxury of choosing based on preference rather than merely price. Alvin selected new shoes without checking clearance racks first. I purchased work clothes that actually fit my changed body. We bought groceries without calculating the running total as items went into our cart. Small freedoms, but they represented a monumental shift in our daily reality. The most significant breakthrough came the following week when I received an unexpected call from James Henderson, Nicholas's former colleague whose New Year's party we hadn't been invited to. "Maxine, I hope I'm not overstepping," he began awkwardly. "But I've been following the situation with Nicholas through industry channels. What he did, it's unconscionable." I murmured non-committal agreement, unsure where the conversation was heading. "The reason I'm calling is that our investment firm is launching a new division focused on family financial planning. We need someone with accounting expertise who also understands the challenges families face during transitions. Your name came up in our search." The job offer took me completely by surprise. The position would mean higher pay, more responsibility, and most importantly, work that aligned with my evolving perspective on financial security and family protection. "I don't understand," I said honestly. 6 months ago, your wife couldn't get me out of the grocery store fast enough. Now your firm wants to hire me?" James had the grace to sound embarrassed. "We handled that poorly. The truth is, we didn't know how to respond to what happened. Nicholas had been our colleague for years. We didn't have all the facts. And now, you do? The financial community talks. When fraud allegations become public, people pay attention. What we know now makes it clear who the wronged party was. We'd like to make it right, if you're interested." I didn't accept immediately, taking time to research the firm, discuss the opportunity with Rodney, who was supportive though sad to lose me, and consider how it would affect our still stabilizing routine. After careful consideration, I negotiated terms that included flexibility for Alvin's needs and accepted the position. The new job represented more than financial improvement. It signified professional recognition, independent of Nicholas's shadow, an opportunity to use my hard-earned wisdom to help others navigate financial challenges. The interview process had focused on my strengths, my experience, my potential, all elements of identity I had begun to reclaim. These external breakthroughs paralleled internal ones. The constant knot of anxiety in my chest had begun to loosen. Sleep came more easily, without the pharmacological assistance I'd reluctantly relied on during our darkest months. The tension headaches receded as financial pressure eased. Even my relationship with Alvin evolved. As immediate survival concerns diminished, we found space for ordinary parent-child interactions rather than functioning as crisis management partners. He began bringing friends home again, participating more fully in school activities, expressing conventional childhood desires rather than precocious pragmatism. One evening, helping him with homework, I realized he was humming, an unconscious expression of contentment I hadn't heard in nearly a year. The sound brought tears to my eyes, a physical manifestation of our gradual healing. The most unexpected breakthrough came through the youth program Nicole Franklin had recommended. Alvin thrived in the structured activities, developing friendships with other children from single-parent homes. For the first time since Nicholas left, He could discuss his family situation without shame or exceptionalism. These children understood without explanation. I found similar acceptance in the parent support network, where stories like mine were common. Some situations were worse. Partners who had disappeared without a trace, leaving even greater financial devastation. Others were less severe but equally instructive. Together, we shared resources, advice, and the profound relief of being truly understood. During one support meeting, I found myself counseling a newly single mother overwhelmed by financial chaos. As I explained basic steps for establishing independence, separate accounts, credit monitoring, expense tracking, I realized how much knowledge I had gained through necessity. "You make it sound manageable," she said, wiping away tears. "I've been drowning in panic." "It is manageable," I assured her. "Not easy, not fair, but definitely manageable. And you don't have to figure it all out alone." The ability to help someone else navigate what I had faced represented perhaps the most significant breakthrough, the transformation of our hardship into wisdom that could benefit others. My pain had purpose. My experience had value beyond my personal growth. As spring's renewal mirrored our circumstances, I recognized how far we had come. The breakthrough wasn't just in recovered funds or improved employment. It was in Alvin's returning laughter, in my rediscovered confidence, in our evolving definition of security that relied more on resilience than on false guarantees. Nicholas had taken much from us, but he hadn't taken everything. What remained? Our bond, our determination, our newly discovered strength, seemed increasingly sufficient foundation for the future we were rebuilding. April marked the one-year anniversary of Nicholas's abandonment. I hadn't planned to acknowledge the date, but my body remembered what my mind tried to forget. I woke that morning with a heaviness in my chest, memories surfacing unbidden. The empty accounts, the hastily scrawled note. The moment I realized our life together had been built on shifting sand, Alvin sensed my mood with his uncanny perceptiveness. "You're sad today," he observed over breakfast. "Just thinking," I replied, forcing a smile. "Big day at work." He studied me with eyes too, knowing for his age. "It's been a year since Dad left, hasn't it?" The question caught me off guard. I'd never told him the exact date, had tried to shield him from such painful milestones. "Yes," I admitted, seeing no point in pretense. "But we're okay now. Better than okay." He nodded solemnly. "We made it a whole year without him." The simple observation reframed everything. Not an anniversary of abandonment, but a celebration of survival. Not a day to mourn what was lost, but to acknowledge what had been gained. Strength, resilience, the profound bond between mother and son forged in adversity. "You're right," I said, reaching for his hand. "We did make it, and that's something to be proud of." That evening, we marked the milestone in our own way, not with cake or celebration, but with a ceremonial clearing of Nicholas's remaining possessions from the attic. Together, we sorted through boxes of his old clothes, books, and mementos, deciding what to donate, what to discard, and the few items Alvin wanted to keep. "Dad won't need these when he comes back?" Alvin asked as we filled donation bags, testing my reaction rather than expressing genuine expectation. "Your father has chosen a different life," I said carefully. "Even if he returned to the States someday, he wouldn't be returning to this house." Alvin considered this, folding a sweatshirt with methodical precision. "I used to wish every night that he'd come home. I don't wish that anymore." The admission carried no sadness, just simple truth, evidence of healing I hadn't fully recognized until that moment. Alvin wasn't waiting anymore, wasn't defining himself by his father's absence. He had reclaimed his childhood from the shadow of abandonment. This reclamation of agency extended beyond emotional healing. The financial recovery continued as Trisha's testimony led investigators to additional hidden accounts. Nicholas, feeling the pressure of frozen assets and potential criminal charges, became more cooperative with settlement negotiations. He's realized his options are narrowing, Patricia explained during our monthly update. International banking regulations have tightened. Countries that once offered easy anonymity now require more documentation. The narrative of wronged husband seeking freedom doesn't play well when fraud evidence mounts. The settlement offer that arrived the following week reflected this changing power dynamic. Full release of all identified funds, clear division of remaining joint assets, and most surprisingly, abandonment of Nicholas's claim to the house in exchange for immunity from criminal prosecution. Is this real? I asked Patricia, suspicious of sudden generosity from a man who had fought every concession. Very real. Nicholas is facing serious consequences if we pursue the criminal fraud angle. This settlement gives him a path to avoid prosecution while providing you with clean financial separation. I studied the documents, noting Nicholas's signature on the final page, the same distinctive scrawl that had appeared on birthday cards, anniversary notes, and finally, the letter ending our marriage. The familiar handwriting no longer triggered pain, just a distant recognition, like identifying a song from childhood. What do you think? Patricia asked when I remained silent. I think we should accept, I said decisively, not because it's perfect justice, but because it gives us closure and security. That's worth more than extending this fight. The decision marked another reclamation of agency, choosing resolution over righteous battle, practical healing over perfect vindication. Nicholas would never fully pay for the emotional damage he had caused, but the settlement would secure our financial future and sever the legal ties binding us to his choices. This newfound agency extended to my professional life as well. My position at Henderson Financial had evolved beyond initial expectations, my perspective as a financially ambushed spouse, providing valuable insight for the firm's family protection services. James had begun including me in client consultations specifically to address vulnerability assessment, identifying and securing potential risk points in family financial structures. Your experience gives you credibility clients respect, he explained after one particularly successful meeting. You've lived what most people only fear. The observation highlighted another unexpected reclamation: the transformation of victimhood into expertise, weakness into wisdom. The very experience that had nearly destroyed us now formed the foundation of my professional value. At home, reclaiming agency meant reimagining our space. With settlement funds available and our financial footing stabilized, I began methodically updating the house Nicholas and I had purchased together, replacing the memories embedded in its features with choices that reflected our current needs and preferences. Alvin and I painted his room, abandoning the sports theme Nicholas had insisted upon for the space-inspired design Alvin had always wanted. We converted the formal dining room we rarely used into a combination homework zone and home office where we could work companionably. The master bedroom, a space I had found difficult to reclaim after Nicholas's departure, underwent the most dramatic transformation, with new paint, bedding, and arranged furniture creating an environment that held no echoes of my former marriage. It doesn't feel like Dad's house anymore, Alvin observed as we arranged new photographs throughout the freshly painted living room. It's ours now. His comment captured exactly what I had hoped to achieve: not erasure of the past, but reclamation of space for our present reality. The house had been a symbol of what Nicholas had taken. Now it embodied what we had rebuilt. Perhaps the most significant act of reclaiming agency came with my decision to legally restore my maiden name, Henderson. The choice wasn't about erasing the past. Alvin would maintain his father's surname, but about reclaiming an identity independent of the marriage that had ended. Are you sure? Maxine asked when I mentioned the decision. It might be confusing for Alvin, having different last names. I've discussed it with him, I explained. He understands this isn't about rejecting our family connection, but about me reclaiming something important. In truth, Alvin had understood more readily than most adults, accepting with a child's adaptability that Mom is taking back her first family name, while he maintained connection to both lineages. The name change process involved countless forms and administrative hurdles: driver's license, social security card, credit cards, professional certifications, each requiring documentation of the divorce decree, each representing another step toward fully reclaimed identity. When the final document arrived, a new passport bearing Maxine Henderson, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with legal status and everything to do with psychological liberation. The woman in the passport photo looked different from the one who had shared Nicholas's name. More self-possessed, certainly, but also more authentically herself. This reclamation of identity extended to social relationships as well. I began carefully rebuilding connections that had frayed during our crisis period, no longer from a position of need but from one of recovered strength. Some friendships had weathered the storm and emerged stronger. Others had revealed fundamental incompatibilities or conditional acceptance that couldn't be overlooked. Most significantly, I allowed myself to establish new connections, joining a book club through the library, accepting dinner invitations from colleagues, participating in community events without Nicholas's mediating presence. These activities weren't attempts to fill the space he had left, but expressions of the person I was becoming, someone with interests, opinions, and social needs independent of marital status. One warm Saturday in late April, I found myself sitting on our newly refinished deck, watching Alvin practice soccer moves in the backyard. He had grown taller over the difficult year, his face losing some of its childish roundness, his movements more coordinated and purposeful. He had changed, as children do, but also in ways unique to our shared experience, developing resilience, empathy, and perspective beyond his years. I had changed too, in ways both visible and internal. The financial expertise forced upon me, by necessity, had become professional strength. The self-reliance required by single parenthood had revealed capabilities I hadn't known I possessed. The painful dismantling of what I thought was security had led to a more authentic understanding of what truly made us safe. Not dependent trust, but informed confidence. Not external guarantees, but internal resilience. Nicholas had taken much from us, but in reclaiming our agency, financial, emotional, spatial, identifiable, we had gained something perhaps more valuable: the unshakable knowledge that we could face whatever came next, not as victims of circumstance, but as architects of our own recovery. May brought renewed energy and purpose to our household. The divorce had been finalized, the settlement implemented, and the lingering legal entanglements with Nicholas had been resolved. For the first time in over a year, I could make decisions without considering their impact on ongoing negotiations, or wondering if they would somehow be used against me. This freedom manifested in both practical and symbolic ways. I opened college, savings accounts in Alvin's name with strong legal protections that would prevent future interference. I updated our wills and established clear guardianship provisions, naming Maxine as Alvin's primary guardian and creating a trust to manage his financial security if anything happened to me. "Is this really necessary?" Maxine asked as we met with the estate attorney. "You're young and healthy." So was Nicholas when he decided to abandon his responsibilities, I pointed out. I never want Alvin to face uncertainty about his care or future again. The restructuring extended beyond financial. Safeguards to our daily routines and household management. Our previous life had been organized around Nicholas's preferences and schedule, meals planned to accommodate his taste, weekends structured around his activities, household responsibilities divided according to traditional gender roles he had insisted upon despite my full-time work. Now, we created systems that served our actual needs rather than inherited patterns. Meals became simpler but healthier, focused on foods Alvin and I enjoyed. Household chores were distributed based on ability and preference rather than convention. with Alvin taking age-appropriate responsibility for tasks that gave him a sense of contribution. "I think I actually prefer doing laundry to taking out trash," he announced one Saturday during our chore rotation experiment. "It's more satisfying to see everything clean and folded." These small revelations, discovering individual preferences, rather than defaulting to assigned roles, characterized our restructured existence. We found ourselves creating new traditions to replace those that had been disrupted by Nicholas's departure. Sunday mornings, once dominated by Nicholas's insistence on elaborate brunches that took hours to prepare, became adventure breakfast days where we tried recipes from different cultures. Mother's Day, previously orchestrated by Nicholas with formal restaurant reservations and obligatory gifts, transformed into a hiking trip followed by ice cream. Alvin's genuine preference, rather than his father's notion of proper celebration. "This is way better than that fancy place Dad always took us," Alvin declared, chocolate ice cream smeared across his smile. "You actually look happy here." His observation highlighted how our restructured life prioritized authentic enjoyment over appearance or convention. We were building routines based on what worked for us, not what matched external expectations of family life. This authenticity extended to how we processed Nicholas's absence. During the crisis period, I had carefully monitored my comments about him, afraid that expressing my true feelings might damage Alvin's relationship with his father or burden him with adult concerns. Now, with greater stability, we developed a more honest approach. "It's okay to miss Dad sometimes and be angry with him other times," I explained during one of our increasingly open conversations. "Feelings don't have to be all one way." "Do you miss him?" Alvin asked, testing the boundaries of our new candor. I considered the question carefully. "I miss the father I thought you had. I miss the partner I believed was committed to our family, but I don't miss the person he turned out to be." Alvin nodded, absorbing this nuanced perspective. "I'm still mad at him for taking my college money. But sometimes I remember good stuff too, like when he taught me to ride a bike." "Both those memories can be true," I affirmed. "People are complicated. Even people who hurt us badly can have done good things too." This more mature framework for understanding his father's abandonment seemed to relieve some of Alvin's internal conflict. He no longer needed to idealize Nicholas or demonize him completely. He could integrate the complicated reality of a parent who had provided care and then inflicted harm. The restructuring of our emotional landscape found physical expression as well. We finally tackled Nicholas's home office, the last space we had left largely untouched since his departure. Together, we sorted through the remaining papers, equipment, and personal items. "What should we do with these?" Alvin asked, holding up a collection of sports memorabilia Nicholas had displayed prominently. "That depends. Do you want to keep anything? They belong to you as much as to him." He studied the items thoughtfully. "Just the baseball Dad caught with me at the Cardinals game. The rest don't really mean anything to me." We boxed the remaining items for storage, neither destroying mementos that might someday hold significance for Alvin, nor allowing them to occupy prime space in our restructured home. The office itself was repurposed as a reading room with comfortable chairs, good lighting, and bookshelves for our growing collection, a space devoted to quiet reflection rather than Nicholas's performative productivity. Professional restructuring accompanied these personal changes. My role at Henderson Financial evolved as I developed a specialty in what we called financial independence planning, helping clients create structures that maintained individual security even within partnership. The work drew directly from my experience transforming painful lessons into practical guidance for others. "You've turned adversity into expertise," James observed during my 6-month review. "Clients connect with your story in a way that builds immediate trust." The recognition felt validating but also strange. My greatest personal failure reframed as professional asset. I had never planned this career path, never imagined specializing in protective financial planning for vulnerable family members. Yet the work felt meaningful precisely because it emerged from authentic experience rather than theoretical knowledge. This integration of personal history and professional identity represented another aspect of our restructured life. I was no longer compartmentalizing, the capable professional in one box, the struggling single mother in another. Instead, these aspects of identity informed and strengthened each other, creating a more cohesive sense of self. Alvin underwent his own restructuring process. With the stability provided by our improved circumstances, he began to explore interests beyond the narrow range of activities Nicholas had encouraged. Soccer remained important, but he also joined the science club, began taking art classes at the community center, and developed an unexpected passion for cooking. Dad always said art was a waste of time, he commented one afternoon, carefully adding detail to a surprisingly skillful drawing. But my art teacher says I have real talent. These discoveries reflected more than typical childhood exploration. They represented Alvin's emerging self-definition, independent of his father's expectations and preferences. Nicholas had emphasized competitive sports and practical skills. Alvin was discovering his own aptitudes for creativity and collaborative activities. Our social world restructured as well, expanding beyond the couples-oriented gatherings that had characterized our lives with Nicholas. I developed friendships with other single parents through Alvin's activities and support groups. We established regular game nights with Maxine's family. Even my parents, initially critical of my handling of the separation, had begun visiting, more frequently, gradually adapting to our new family configuration. "You've done remarkably well," my father acknowledged during their spring visit. The closest he would come to admitting his earlier advice had been misguided. "The house looks good. Alvin seems happy. You seem stronger somehow." The observation captured an essential truth about our restructured life. We hadn't merely survived Nicholas's betrayal, we had rebuilt something that, while different from our previous existence, contained elements of authentic strength the old structure had lacked. The foundation of this new construction was honesty about our circumstances, our feelings, our needs, and our capabilities. We no longer maintained facades of perfection or conventional family life. Instead, we acknowledged challenges directly, celebrated small victories genuinely, and built systems that reflected our actual situation, rather than aspirational images. 1 year after Nicholas's abandonment, our restructured life wasn't perfect. Financial challenges still arose. Alvin still experienced moments of grief or confusion about his father's absence. I still confronted the complex emotions of betrayal and recovery. But these challenges existed within a framework designed to address reality rather than maintain illusions, a structure built for resilience rather than appearance. "We're different now, aren't we, Mom?" Alvin observed one evening as we prepared dinner together, a domestic scene that would have been unimaginable in our previous life where Nicholas dominated the kitchen on the rare occasions he cooked. "Yes," I agreed, watching him confidently measure ingredients. "Different, but good different, I think." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I like who we are now, even though getting here was really hard." His wisdom, beyond his years but earned through experience, encapsulated the essence of our restructured existence. We had not chosen the catastrophe that forced us to rebuild, but we had chosen how to construct what came after, a life more authentically ours than the one we had lost. Summer arrived with unexpected news. Nicole called one evening, her professional tone immediately alerting me that this wasn't a social call. "We've received intelligence that Nicholas Walsh has returned to the United States," she said without preamble. "Immigration records show he entered through Miami 3 days ago." The information landed like a physical blow. After more than a year abroad, after all the legal proceedings conducted through attorneys and international channels, Nicholas was back on American soil, within driving distance. "Has he made contact with anyone locally?" I asked, instinctively lowering my voice though Alvin was at soccer practice. Not that we know of, but I wanted you to be prepared in case he attempts to approach you or Alvin. Directly. After we hung up, I sat motionless at the kitchen table, processing implications. The divorce was final. The settlement implemented. The legal ties severed. Yet Nicholas's physical return threatened the stability we had worked so hard to establish. Would he try to see Alvin? Attempt to renegotiate terms? Simply appear at our door expecting, what? I called Patricia immediately, who confirmed the information and outlined our options. The custody agreement is clear, she reminded me. He has no visitation rights until he completes the court-mandated parenting evaluation and financial responsibility courses. If he approaches Alvin without following proper channels, it would constitute a violation. I notified Alvin's school, his soccer coach, and the summer program administrators, providing Nicholas's photo and clear instructions. Alvin was not to leave with his father under any circumstances. That evening, I faced the hardest conversation, preparing Alvin without frightening him. Your father has returned to the country, I said carefully as we walked the dog. He might try to contact you. Alvin's step faltered momentarily. Does he want to see me? I don't know his intentions, I admitted. But if he approaches you at school or somewhere I'm not present, I need you to tell an adult immediately and call me. Not because it's dangerous, but because there are legal procedures he needs to follow first. Alvin considered this with his characteristic thoughtfulness. What if I don't want to see him? The question revealed growth I hadn't fully recognized, from a child desperately missing his father to one capable of setting boundaries based on self-protection. That's your decision to make, I assured him. You can always say no, and any adult who knows our situation will support that choice. For 2 weeks, we maintained heightened vigilance. I varied our routines, accompanied Alvin to activities I might normally have dropped him at, kept my phone constantly accessible. The strain of anticipation created a low-grade tension that permeated our carefully reconstructed life. Then came the letter, delivered by certified mail rather than personal appearance. I recognized Nicholas's handwriting on the envelope, addressed to both Alvin and me. Inside was a 5-page handwritten message, part explanation, part apology, part request. He wrote of profound regret for his impulsive decisions, described therapy he had undertaken after Trisha left him, outlined plans to make proper amends and rebuild appropriate relationships. He requested supervised visitation with Alvin and a civilized conversation with me about potential co-parenting approaches for the future. The letter was articulate, seemingly sincere, hitting emotional notes that might once have swayed me. But the woman reading it had developed a finely calibrated detection system for manipulation wrapped in reasonable language. What are you going to do? Maxine asked when I shared the contents with her. Follow the legal process, I said firmly. If he's sincere about rebuilding a relationship with Alvin, he'll complete the court requirements first. If this is just another manipulation tactic, he'll balk at the structure and reveal his true intentions. I drafted a brief formal response through Patricia. Any contact must proceed through appropriate legal channels. Completion of court-mandated requirements would be necessary before visitation discussion. Alvin's well-being remained the priority. In all decisions, what about Alvin? Maxine asked. Will you show him the letter? The question highlighted the most significant test of our new reality. In our old life, I might have shielded Alvin from difficult decisions, might have managed his relationship with Nicholas based on my own judgments or fears. In our restructured existence, I recognized his need for appropriate agency. Nicholas's response came swiftly but through unexpected channels. Rather than engaging with the legal requirements I'd outlined, he appeared at Alvin's soccer game the following Saturday. I spotted him immediately, standing slightly apart from other parents, designer sunglasses not quite concealing his identity, watching Alvin with an expression I couldn't interpret. My pulse accelerated, protective instincts flaring. I scanned for security personnel, positioned myself to intercept if he approached the field. He made no move toward Alvin, instead catching my eye and gesturing toward the parking lot, a request for conversation away from the children. After a moment's deliberation, I nodded to Coach Bennett, who understood the situation and promised to keep Alvin on the field. Nicholas had aged. The man who approached me looked thinner, his designer clothes hanging slightly loose, fine lines, etched around his eyes that hadn't been there before. Paradise, apparently, had extracted its own costs. "Maxine," he began, voice softer than I remembered. "Thank you for speaking with me." "This isn't appropriate," I replied evenly. "You received my attorney's response. There's a process you need to follow." He shook his head impatiently. "I'm not interested in jumping through bureaucratic hoops just to see my son. Those hoops exist to protect Alvin's well-being after you abandoned him without a word. They're not optional." His jaw tightened, a familiar precursor to the self-righteous anger I'd witnessed during our marriage. "I made mistakes. I've acknowledged that. But dragging this through courts and evaluations only prolongs everyone's pain." "Pain you created," I noted calmly. "Pain you're still creating by ignoring boundaries." We stood facing each other, physically closer than we'd been in over a year, emotionally separated by an unbridgeable chasm of betrayal and consequences. "You've turned Alvin against me," he accused, frustration breaking through his controlled facade. "I've helped him process being abandoned by his father. There's a difference." Nicholas ran a hand through his expensively cut hair. "Look, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But Alvin needs his father. Alvin needed his father last year when you cleaned out his college fund and disappeared. He needed his father during every nightmare, every school event, every moment he questioned his own worth because you left. Where were you then?" My voice remained steady, not rising into the emotional response he seemed to expect. This wasn't the confrontation he had scripted. The hysterical ex-wife he could dismiss as unreasonable, the vindictive mother keeping him from his child. Instead, he faced a woman speaking uncomfortable truths with the clarity of someone who had processed her anger into resolve. "I want to make it right," he insisted. "I've changed." "Then demonstrate that change by respecting the process. Complete the parenting evaluation. Take the financial responsibility course. Show Alvin through actions, not words, that you're committed to being in his life appropriately." The confrontation might have escalated further, but at that moment, a small voice interrupted us. "Dad?" Alvin stood several yards away, still in his soccer uniform, uncertainty written across his features. He had apparently spotted us from the field and slipped away despite Coach Bennett's efforts. Nicholas's expression transformed instantly, the practice charm emerging as he moved toward his son. "Hey, champ, you've gotten so tall." I watched, carefully, ready to intervene if necessary, but allowing Alvin the agency to navigate this unexpected encounter. Alvin didn't rush into his father's arms as Nicholas clearly expected. Instead, he maintained his distance, studying the man who had abandoned him as if examining a stranger. "You left without saying goodbye," he said simply. 3 sentences, direct, unadorned with melodrama or accusation, yet devastating in their childlike precision. Nicholas visibly flinched. "I know, buddy. I made some big mistakes. But I'm back now, and I want us to spend time together again." The aftermath of that encounter at the soccer field crystallized everything our journey had taught us. Nicholas, faced with the reality rather than the fantasy of reconciliation, followed the expected pattern. Initial promises, followed by gradual disengagement when immediate gratification wasn't forthcoming. He began the court-mandated parenting evaluation, but never completed it. He scheduled and then canceled the financial responsibility course twice. The supervised visitation he claimed to desperately want was arranged, then rescheduled, then forgotten entirely. 6 weeks after his dramatic return, he accepted a position with an international firm in Singapore, his departure as abrupt as his arrival. The sole communication was a text message to me. Taking a great opportunity abroad. We'll be in touch when settled. Alvin received this news with a wisdom beyond his years. He's not really coming back, is he? I don't think so, honey. Not in the way that matters. He nodded, absorbing this without the devastation that might have accompanied it months earlier. I think I knew that at the soccer field. He looked at me the same way he used to look at his trophies. The observation was startlingly perceptive. Nicholas had always valued possessions and accomplishments as reflections of himself, rather than for their intrinsic worth. Alvin had recognized what had taken me years to understand. His father's interest was in ownership, not relationship. This final disappointment, rather than crushing Alvin, seemed to provide closure. He had seen his father not as the mythologized figure of memory, but as the flawed, self-centered man he actually was. The encounter had tested our new reality and confirmed its foundation. We had built something stronger than what we had lost. Fall brought Alvin's 11th birthday, celebrated with a confidence and joy that reflected our evolution. Friends from school and the youth program filled our backyard. Maxine and Paul arrived with extravagant presents. Even my parents drove in for the occasion, my father grilling burgers while my mother organized games with surprising enthusiasm. As I watched Alvin surrounded by people who genuinely cared for him, I reflected on the journey we had traveled. From the shock of abandonment through the desperate months of survival to the gradual rebuilding of security, each stage had transformed us in ways we couldn't have anticipated. The college fund, once emptied by Nicholas's betrayal, now held a respectable balance through careful deposits and the settlement recovery. Our home, once a monument to broken promises, had become a genuine haven reflecting our preferences and priorities. My career, redirected by necessity, now provided both financial security and meaningful purpose. Most importantly, Alvin had emerged, not merely unscathed but strengthened by the experience. The resilience he had developed, the emotional intelligence he displayed, the confidence he had gained in our stability, these qualities might serve him better throughout life than the false security of our previous existence. As the party wound down and guests departed, Alvin found me in the kitchen putting away leftover cake. "This was the best birthday ever," he declared, helping me wrap plates. "Even without fancy presents?" I teased gently, knowing Nicholas had always emphasized expensive gifts over meaningful experiences. "Because it was real," he said with simple certainty. Everyone was here because they wanted to be, not because they had to be. His insight captured the essence of our resolution. We had learned to value authenticity over appearance, relationship over possession, resilience over false security. The painful journey had led us not back to where we started, but to somewhere entirely new, somewhere, perhaps, we needed to be all along. That night, after tucking Alvin in, I sat on our back porch, watching stars emerge in the autumn sky. 1.5 years ago, Nicholas had emptied our accounts and walked away, believing he was taking everything of value from our lives. In that moment of betrayal, I had believed it too. How wrong we both had been. What remained after his theft, our bond, our determination, our capacity for growth, had proven more valuable than anything he had taken. In losing what I thought was essential, I had discovered what truly mattered. In rebuilding from devastation, we had constructed something more genuine than what had been destroyed. My 10-year-old son had said it best, with the unfiltered wisdom children sometimes possess. "We don't need anyone else. We're going to be okay." And we were. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.